On today's show, Kevin Durant traded to the Houston Rockets, breaking down the deal, why adding KD makes Houston title contenders, and more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Kevin Durant is a member of the Houston Rockets. Wow. Still can't believe I'm uttering that sentence on this show. What is up? And welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform you're choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. We have got so much to get into on today's show, reacting to the news that Kevin Durant has been traded to the Houston Rockets. Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and the number 10 pick in this year's draft, as well as 5 second-round picks, are the outgoing part of the trade package. We're going to break all of that down for you. We're going to get into why adding Kevin Durant makes them legitimate title contenders, why they felt the need to make this move, what it means for the immediate here and now, as well as what it means for the Houston Rockets' future. So many different angles to tackle from this blockbuster breaking news deal. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. KD is a Rocket. Wow, that is going to take some getting used to be able to say. It's been a crazy trade saga, with the Rockets emerging as one of the finalists to land Kevin Durant. The reporting from Shams Charania suggests that it came down to the Houston Rockets and the Miami Heat in the wee hours of the night, and they went back and forth with the Suns, and ultimately Phoenix electing to go with the Phoenix package, or the Rockets package, I should say, of Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, the number 10 overall pick, and 5 future second-round draft picks. We're going to focus on the transactional part of this deal in just a moment, but let's just take a moment and think about what adding Kevin Durant to this young Rockets team means. First off, they add Kevin Durant to a team that just came off a 52-win season. They add Kevin Durant to a team that has one of the best young head coaches in the entire association, in Ime Udoka. They add Kevin Durant to a team that's biggest weakness this past year, despite managing to win 52 wins in the regular season, despite taking a very talented Warriors team all the way to 7 games. The Rockets' most glaring weakness was their inability to get buckets when they needed them. The fact that they did not have a true 1A scoring option at the end of games. Sometimes you, sometimes me, always us. It was a beautiful mantra to have throughout the regular season. And there were times where it very much felt that way, right? Where the Rockets were greater than the sum of their parts. But there were too many games that were lost, both in the regular season and specifically in the playoffs against the Warriors, where they just could not manufacture points at the end of a game, where they did not have a talent good enough to be able to step up and win them a basketball game. Kevin Durant gives them that. This is as clear a signal as you can get from the Houston Rockets that they are in win now mode. Kevin Durant is now your best player on the floor, and the changes or any other subsequent changes that we will see with the roster will ultimately reflect that. KD steps into a situation where he gets to be the number 1 option on a team that already has a stalwart defensive identity. Kevin Durant is still a very capable and plus-level defender in his own right, so he fits in and will mesh with that team identity immediately. There's no questions about that. Ime Udoka and Kevin Durant have a pre-existing relationship. Ime has coached KD before. Ime knows exactly what to expect by adding Kevin Durant to this Rockets team. Kevin Durant elevates this Rockets team from one of the young, plucky, upstart teams in the NBA that had a really bright future in this exciting young core into an immediate win now contending move without, and this is the important notion here that I want Rockets fans to remember, without sacrificing their long-term ability to contend at the highest level. This is both a win now move as well as a move that, given the cost of the assets that you sent out, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, the number 10 pick, and 5 second-round picks, you still have a monumental treasure trove of assets down the line. You still have the bright futures of Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., who was integral. Keeping him was huge in this deal. Tari Eason, Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Reed Shepherd. Keeping 6 out of the 7 members of the young core while still adding KD to a team that just won 52 games this past season and could have been more, honestly, addressing literally the team's biggest weakness. This is the most slam dunk move of slam dunk moves. And yes, there are still some slight concerns on the surface. KD will be 37 next year. He has a pre-existing injury history. These are very valid concerns looking at the Rockets acquiring KD. However, the Rockets should be in a position that they can mitigate some of those concerns. They don't have to heavily rely on KD getting them a guaranteed 25, 30, 35 a night in order to be able to win games. They've got plenty of other guys that can do the heavy lifting throughout the 82-game slog of the regular season, or even throughout a 48-minute basketball affair. KD doesn't need to be KD for this team to be able to have a chance to win games every night. KD can literally just slot in and take the shot diet of Dillon Brooks and Jalen Green, pick up some of their attempts, and then you just increase the roles for guys like Alperen Sengun, a bigger role offensively for him, a bigger role substantially for Amen Thompson offensively, maybe a bigger role for Jabari Smith Jr. offensively, who will probably be reinserted into the starting lineup now with the losses of both Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks. Bigger roles for Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore. The Rockets have more than enough talent to close the gap offensively while adding KD and allowing him to maybe coast a little bit at times. You know, let him step in and be your closer. Let him be the guy that gets you a bucket when you absolutely need it. But this Rockets team will absolutely still be able to win on the backs of their defense, and they won't need Kevin Durant to drop 25 or 30 every single night for them to have a remote chance to win games. And that mantra of sometimes you, sometimes me, always us, it can still apply to this team. And there can be nights where KD has a super quiet, efficient 18, 20 points, and other guys step up to the plate and win big. And the Rockets are going to be able to win a lot of games with this new dynamic. Adding a 7-foot-tall, arguably one of the most unguardable, if not the most unguardable scorer in NBA history, a future Hall of Famer, to this Rockets team has them painted as at least, on paper, going to the Western Conference Finals next season. You could even just look at this team from this year, and if you just replace Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks with Kevin Durant, that team easily gets past the Warriors. That team easily gets past the Minnesota Timberwolves. And that team puts up a really, really good fight against the OKC Thunder that are now in the NBA Finals, approaching Game 7 with the Indiana Pacers. I've maintained this. This Thunder team is not unbeatable, but you got to take a swing. And that's exactly what Rafael Stone, Ime Udoka, and the Houston Rockets did. They took a massive swing for Kevin Durant. They did not mortgage their future. And this is a trade that puts them firmly in the championship discussion starting next season. Coming up, we're going to break down the deal, what the specific logistics are of the trade, when we can expect the official deal to be finalized, and all the different moving parts concerned here, as well as what it means losing Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks for this team. Plus, we take a look at the future. What are the next moves to come out of this? What's next for the Phoenix Suns and the Houston Rockets still owning their draft capital? So much stuff to get into. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Olipop. Look, Olipop is a new kind of soda made for people who love the classic taste of soda, but want something that actually supports their health. With just 2 to 5 grams of sugar and 9 grams of prebiotic fiber in every single can, Olipop is reimagining soda in a way that's better for your gut. Traditional sodas are loaded with sugar, like 39 grams in a regular Coke or 44 grams in an orange Fanta. Olipop flips that script with just a fraction of the sugar, no artificial sweeteners, and gut-friendly ingredients like OliSmart, a blend shown to support digestive and overall health. It's soda that tastes like the real thing, but actually does something good for your body. Look, I have been a soda fiend my entire life. Cokes, Dr. Peppers, you name it, I'm probably chugging it. I was really happy when I found Olipop because it gives you that classic soda taste, but knowing that it's actually good for you and good for your gut, good for your overall health is just the push that I needed to be able to make the switch. Usually I'm a vintage cola guy. That's usually my favorite flavor. Right now, I've got the classic root beer on hand. This one's honestly really good as well. I haven't tried a single bad flavor from Olipop. I also really like the crisp apple when I want to switch it up and want something that doesn't really taste too soda-y, you know? You can check them out too. Get a free can of Olipop. Just buy any 2 cans in store and they'll reimburse you for 1. Head to drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba to claim your free can and find Olipop near you. That's drinkolipop.com/lockedonnba. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Welcome to all the new Kevin Durant fans, too, who are hopefully pouring into this show. Hopefully we can keep you entertained and informed as the Houston Rockets navigate these next steps in the aftermath of acquiring KD. Should be a fun ride. And now that the KD saga is over, both of these organizations, the Rockets and the Suns, can figure out start plotting their next moves. But let's go ahead and break down this trade and kind of what it means for the Rockets, to be able to pick up KD and the outgoing asset cost. So this is one of the permutations of the trade that we ultimately broke down. We've been spending so much time talking about the KD trade saga. The outgoing package being Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, the number 10 overall pick in this year's draft, as well as 5 second-round picks. So the Rockets were able to certainly grease the wheels on their package by including, a little chest of second-round assets without touching any of the other future Suns assets, the 2027 first-round pick or the 2029 first-round pick, both still fully unprotected. So that is a monumental win for Rafael Stone and the Rockets front office. Looking at the outgoing pieces, though, first, it hurts to lose Dillon Brooks. Dillon Brooks ingratiated himself as one of the fan favorites with this Houston Rockets team. He went to war every single night for the Rockets. He's a guy that's really easy to hate when he's not on a team, but absolutely easy to love when he is on your team. So the Suns are getting an absolute dog in Dillon Brooks and a guy who is going to go to war every single night, whatever that team ultimately looks like. And losing him, right, he was the team's best shooter. He was one of the team's best defenders. He helped set the defensive tone and identity for this Rockets roster with Ime Udoka. But at the end of the day, he also had his limitations as a player. There were some games where his offensive, output was, a little sporadic, a little off the charts. And even though the 3-point shooting became really consistent here in Houston, there was always that worry that he would revert back to maybe more so of the player that he was in Memphis. Maybe that 3-point shooting that was off the charts this season, close to 40%, drops back down to earth next year. And God, what would that do to the Rockets offense if suddenly their best 3-point shooter reverts back to being, around league average or even worse than league average potentially. So losing DB sucks, but this Rockets team in these first 2 years under Ime Udoka, they've learned so much. All the other young guys have learned so much. They don't need the training wheels as much anymore, right? There's still more than enough defensive versatility on this roster on the wings between Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Kevin Durant, Cam Whitmore, who needs to figure out the defensive end of the basketball, waiting in the wings, though. There's still plenty of pieces that will keep together the Rockets' defensive identity, and I fully expect them to still be a top 5 defense this next season, even with losing Dillon Brooks at the end of the day. Jalen Green. This is going to be tough for some Rockets fans to stomach, but the Rockets gave up on Jalen Green. They did. And he had plenty of opportunities to show them that he could be the player that they hoped he would become. There were rumors about this KD trade all the way back at the trade deadline, right? And this KD trade has been staring the Rockets in the face for the better part of almost 6 months now. And it's understandable for all the reasons that we laid out in the first segment, right? The biggest weakness being the inability to get buckets when you needed them. Jalen Green, when he was drafted, was drafted in the archetype of an elite scoring two guard, a guy that you could project to be the best scorer on a championship team, the guy who could be the best, bucket getter on a roster that was contending for deep playoff runs and contending for titles. And while Jalen is still a good player, and while he has shown immense growth in other areas of his game as a defender, as a playmaker, the hustle, the work ethic, it's all there. His offensive game has not grown enough in the 4 years that he's been in the NBA to have given the Rockets confidence that he was the piece that would eventually lead them to the promised land as their top scorer. All the projecting, all the posturing, Rafael Stone's answer to my question at the end of season press conference regarding the JG data, it was all just smoke, because they knew internally, and this is their decision. This is clear as day, their decision. Moving on from Jalen Green signifies they did not believe in what he could potentially become down the line. And I said this in our recent episode, but they value the immediate win now impact and how much Kevin Durant will elevate this Rockets team in the here and now for at least the next 2 to 3 years. They value that more than any hypothetical future where Jalen Green continues to grow, improve, get better, maybe become an all-star. We'll see. But for his archetype of player to hit, it needs to hit at the 99th percentile outcome. Otherwise, if you're floating around that 80%, 85% outcome, you can still be a really good player. Jalen Green can be the guy that's going to win you some games by himself when he gets incredibly hot. But when he disappears on you, when you rely on that 20, 25 points a night and he can't give that to you, like in the playoffs, it's going to be really hard to win. And that archetype sounds like a sixth man at the end of the day. And maybe that's going to be Jalen Green's role somewhere down. Maybe that's going to be his role in Phoenix, playing behind Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. But it's sad to see the first pick of the Rockets rebuild gone. That number 2 overall pick that inspired so much hope amongst the fan base in the immediate aftermath of losing James Harden, losing a top 5 player in his prime. That hurt, right? The Rockets fans hung a lot of hope on Jalen Green, and he did his absolute best to try and deliver that hope to Houston. It ultimately didn't work out, but I do wish him the best moving forward as well. For Dillon Brooks too, wish them both the best in their future professional careers. They were always professionals here in Houston. They worked hard. They did whatever they could do to try and win games for the Houston Rockets. And it just came time to move on. And the NBA is a business at the end of the day, and acquiring Kevin Durant is a no-brainer given what else it cost in this trade. The number 10 overall pick going out. That one was always going to be a part of these trade discussions. It very much seemed like that was the pick that was going to be the hang up for the Suns. And look, the Suns get exactly what they want out of this. They get a win now player, a veteran who can help anchor their defense in Dillon Brooks. They get a young player with a ton of upside potential in Jalen Green, despite the clunkiness of there being Bradley Beal and Devin Booker in Phoenix. So we'll see ultimately what happens there. Maybe they ultimately decide to reroute Jalen Green and send him to a third team. Who knows? Given the reporting was that they weren't interested in Jalen Green at all. That number 10 overall pick also presents their first opportunity to add another young, talented player to a very old roster, a roster that needs an infusion of youth and upside ability, even if they do plan on still competing with Devin Booker as their best player in the here and now. And then the 5 second-round draft picks. This is why when the Rockets were coughing up second-round picks back in the day to offload Ty Washington and Usman Garuba and all this is why asset management Twitter was freaking out about just burning assets to get rid of players rather than, smartly managing those picks because of moments like this. 1 or 2 second-round picks in a vacuum, not going to do much. Loading 5 second-round picks into a confetti cannon and blasting it at a potential KD trade to grease the wheels is huge. So credit to Rafael Stone and the Rockets front office for being able to pony up and get this trade over the finish line. We don't know what the reported package was going to be from the Miami Heat, but obviously the Suns felt good enough to take the Rockets package. The Rockets had to up their ante probably a little bit by including Dillon Brooks instead of it just being the salary filler of Jock Landale and Aaron Holiday and Nate Williams and whatever they could have done to try to get up to the salary floor of KD's $54 million. So it's unfortunate to lose Dillon Brooks, but then also, including those 5 second-round picks, that may have been the difference maker, right? If the Rockets only had 2 or 3 second-round picks available, maybe they would have gone with the Miami package Ultimately, we'll never know. But the way this trade breaks down, the Rockets absolutely come out on top. You get Kevin Durant for pennies on the dollar, and it opens up more room. It opens up opportunity on the floor for guys like Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore, who haven't been able to sniff the Rockets rotation this past season. So they have an opportunity for still these young guys to take some serious steps forward this next season. We've seen the flashes from Cam. We've seen the flashes from Reed Shepherd. And Ime Udoka spoke so highly of them at his exit press conference, almost as if he knew that there would be a way for them to open up some extra opportunity for these young guys to continue to carve out their roles on this Rockets team. So coming up, what's next for the Houston Rockets? What are the following moves? What about the Suns' future and how the Rockets still have them in a fantastic position to take advantage of their draft capital further down the line? We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? It's happened to me more often than I'd like to admit. Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment costs, it can be easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building your wealth. Look, when I started using Monarch, I was disappointed when I realized just how much I was spending on food, dining out at restaurants, fast food, delivery fees, all that stuff. Now I budget smarter and save more. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, really quickly, meant to mention it in the trade part of the show one segment ago, but because of the poison pill restriction on Jalen Green's contract because of his rookie scale extension, the trade cannot be finalized until July 6th. So this trade has been agreed to in principle between the Rockets and Suns, and that means that come draft night a little bit later this week, when the Rockets are on the board at pick 10, it's not really the Rockets. So whoever gets selected at pick 10 is going to walk across the stage and put on a Rockets hat and take questions about being drafted to the Houston Rockets, although everybody in the world is going to know that player is getting sent to the Phoenix Suns. So the Suns are making the pick for the Rockets with their own pick at pick number 10. God, it's funny how that works. Shout out to Rafael Stone for having the foresight to flip the Nets picks back to Brooklyn and to take hostage of the Suns picks moving forward, because my goodness, this trade couldn't have happened. These negotiations wouldn't have taken place if the Rockets didn't own all this draft capital from Phoenix. And the fact that they were able to retain the 2027 and 2029 first round picks of the Suns is unbelievable. That I felt like those were going to be the hangups on this trade. And honestly, it wouldn't have shocked me if there was an outcome where the Suns chose to deal KD somewhere else because they felt, slighted or frustrated that Houston was unwilling to give them some of their future draft capital back in case things go wrong in these next couple of years, trying to compete with a team led by Devin Booker and Jalen Green and Dillon Brooks and whatever else they're able to do in the aftermath of the KD trade. Because that's the thing, is the Suns now have 2 years. They've got this next season, and then they've got the 26-27 season to try and compete at the highest level. And if they implode at all across these next 2 years, the Rockets are going to be sitting there waiting with bated breath, waiting to capitalize on that 2027 first round pick, which has the chance to be really, really good if Phoenix flounders in a stacked Western Conference that isn't getting any easier, or especially that 2029 pick, where if Phoenix can't put together a winning roster in the next couple years, you think Devin Booker's really going to want to ride it out in the desert, wasting his prime years? No, he's going to request a trade. He's going to put in a trade demand, and then the Suns are going to have to offload Devin Booker, and the Rockets are going to be sitting there still owning their draft capital. This was a masterclass GM move by Rafael Stone. And one more bit that I want to talk about here is I want to give the Rockets front office, and in particular Rafael Stone, a ton of credit here, because this is a hard pill to swallow, to admit, to basically signal, hey, Like, we believed in Jalen Green, but now we have to choose to move on. That's why executives get paid the big bucks. That's why fans aren't in these front offices. And that's why on this very podcast, I and my co-hosts in this show has received a lot of flack and a lot of hate, because at the end of the day, you have to be able to recognize when it's time to move on from a player. When that player is not going to be able to take you where you want to go or accomplish the things you want to accomplish. And I want to give the Rockets front office and Rafael Stone all the credit in the world for identifying and recognizing, you know what? We tried with Jalen Green. We gave him 2 years in a winning environment. He had the keys from the moment that he was drafted as a rookie. He got all the reps, all the opportunities across 4 years. And in that 4 years, just didn't show enough for them to have the confidence in him moving forward. And that's why they made the KD trade. So ton of credit there to admit, hey, we might have missed on him with the number 2 pick, but it still ultimately turned into acquiring Kevin Durant and now putting this team in a position where they could be competing, or will be competing for titles for the next 2 or 3 years, even as these other young guys are coming into their own. So what's next for the Rockets here? First off, the next probably biggest thing is, well, they don't have any draft pick. They don't have a first round pick, at least in this year's NBA draft. But who knows? Maybe Rafael Stone pulls, a rabbit out of a hat and swings a draft night trade. And maybe the Rockets do elect to bring in a little bit of young talent. I wouldn't hold my breath on that. I feel like the Rockets are probably not going to do anything crazy on draft night. It feels like all of their next subsequent moves will be moves that are ultimately made to round out this roster now that they know that they have Kevin Durant, now that they know what direction they're ultimately going in. And that means the next biggest move for them to figure out is renegotiating the contract with Fred VanVleet. That is going to be priority number 1, figuring out what the new deal with Fred VanVleet is going to look like and how they can structure said deal in order to give themselves the most financial flexibility to still have access to, hopefully, at least the non-taxpayer MLE, as it's currently projected by Bobby Marks of ESPN, with Fred VanVleet's team option sitting on the books, as well as the team option for Aaron Holiday, the contracts for Reed Shepherd and Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, the new deal for Steven Adams, all that stuff. The Rockets' projected salary is $205 million right now, which puts them clearly into the first apron, which means that they don't have access to the mid-level exception as one of their abilities to improve the roster. Now, that being said, they can get below that first apron depending on how they renegotiate the contract for Fred VanVleet. And that's going to be the sweet spot, is making sure that they're able to re-sign Fred VanVleet on a team-friendly contract for the next 3 or 4 years and getting it just low enough to be able to access at least the taxpayer MLE. Just looking at the numbers, I don't know that there's a way for them to get low enough below the tax bracket in order to be able to use the non-taxpayer MLE. But we'll be exploring that as a potential option in a future episode, so be on the lookout for that. This is just immediate reaction. Have had very little time to kind of wrap my head around everything. But figuring out Fred's contract is going to be priority numero uno for this team. After figuring out Fred's contract, that's when they need to, start looking at other spots in the roster, be it with, that potential MLE, be it with vet minimums, how they want to ultimately flesh things out on this roster. But looking at it on paper right now, you've got a projected starting lineup of Fred VanVleet, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, with a reserve unit of Reed Shepherd, Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, and Steven Adams. That's your core 9-man rotation. And then outside of those guys, they do still have some free agents that they could ultimately elect to bring back. They've got Jeff Green that they could bring back on a vet minimum. They've got Aaron Holiday that they can bring back on his team option. They've got Jayshawn Tate, whose contract came up, and maybe Tate elects to move on to another team that has more of a concrete role for him, but he's been the captain of the Stay Ready crew for a couple years now, and he's been an important piece whenever other guys have missed significant time for Ime Udoka to be able to rely on. He fits the mentality and identity of this team. I'd really like to see Jayshawn Tate stay, but only if he's willing to stick around, right, on a vet minimum kind of contract, a cheap team-friendly deal. And given the direction of this team and the fact that they are about to start vying for titles left and right over these next 2 or 3 years, maybe this is a place where Tate would like to stay rather than bouncing to another organization to make a little bit more money, still probably in a reserve role. But The Rockets do have options here to ultimately flesh out the roster. This is still a roster that looks to be in desperate need of some shooting. Both Cam Whitmore and Reed Shepherd should provide some additional shooting, assuming they're able to crack the rotation this next season. We know that Aaron Holiday provides shooting, so maybe the Rockets bring him back as some insurance for Reed Shepherd if he's not quite ready to be in the rotation this next season. Although if Reed's not ready to be in the rotation in year 2, then there might be some alarm bells ringing about their future with him and potentially being able to take over the reins from Fred VanVleet at the end of the day. But I'm trying to make sure that I don't miss on any points that I wanted to hit on here. Wow, sorry. I'm still just trying to I'm like sitting here in shock. I'm like sifting through my notes. I'm trying to make sure that I don't miss any points that I wanted to highlight. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of everything. The Rockets are now they have a concrete direction that they're going. They are trying to win now. Ime Udoka is a win now coach. He's done a fantastic job developing the young talent on the roster, but this very clearly gives the Rockets a big three in the immediate here and now of Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, and Amen Thompson. And the message that I've been trying to convey here for so long on this show has been that, you know what? I knew there was one more thing that I wanted to hit on. The KD extension. There we go. That's the important bit. Is KD was projected to sign a 2-year extension wherever he ultimately got traded. And for the Rockets acquiring KD, being on that short list of teams that, he ultimately wanted to go to, signifies that the Rockets are going to eventually, at some point this offseason, ink that extension with Kevin Durant. That's the benefit of being on his short list of preferred teams. They're not taking a 1-year swing at KD. This isn't a situation where KD comes to Houston, plays 1 season, and then bounces and goes to the highest bidder next season. No, the Rockets are going to have KD for at minimum 2 to 3 years. The likelihood is he'll sign a 2-year extension. And that'll guarantee the Rockets have KD on their roster for at least the next 3 seasons, while Amen Thompson and Alperen Sengun continue to grow and get better. Maybe we see Amen Thompson's first All-Star selection this next season. Hell, there's a reality where the Rockets could have 3 All-Stars this next year between Kevin Durant, Alperen Sengun, and Amen Thompson. Only time will tell how those guys develop, what this team ultimately looks like. On paper, though, this is a title contender. On paper, this is a team that can go toe-to-toe with the OKC Thunder. On paper, this is a team that could be bringing the 3rd title to the city of Houston somewhere in these next couple years, and that's really exciting stuff to think about. So I'm excited, and I will say, Rafael. So we tried to get it done on the Podfather's birthday. We tried to get it done for Ben Dubose. The KD trade was a little late for him. His birthday on the 18th. My birthday was the 21st, and knowing that Rafael Stone was up in the wee hours of the night on my birthday trying to get a KD trade facilitated to Houston, he pulled it off a little later than I would have liked, but a hell of a birthday present. Excited for the future of this team. Excited to see what other moves they're going to be making. Of course, we'll have you guys covered for all of that right here at Locked On Rockets. If you want to, go check out Locked On Suns. See their reaction to the news. See what their expectations are out of this trade and what the next steps are for them. We'll probably do another crossover between Suns and Rockets here in the not-so-distant future, so be on the lookout for that. Of course, we're going to have you covered for all this reaction, all the analysis, all the news, everything going on with this trade in the coming days and weeks. But with that, that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show, whether it's on a podcast platform, on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here with us. Remember, the best way to help us grow the show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform you're choosing, and then like, comment, subscribe on YouTube while you're there. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.